we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another live chat for Wednesday, March 9th. Well, we had, over the past 48 hours, we've had spring, almost summer-like, with temperatures in the mid-70s. And now we have snow, which barely really didn't stick aside from the highest elevations. And we have another major storm on the way as well, more so with heavy rainfall and higher elevation snowfall. So what I was thinking tonight is kind of go over the pattern overall. We'll take a look at the observations. And I want to break down the storm that is coming up for this weekend. And even though for a lot of you it's going to just be rain, there's other factors as well that we're going to keep an eye on that I wanted to point out, especially with the 850 millibar jet and potential for some stronger winds with that. And of course, answer all your questions and maybe just a little bit of ranting about baseball later on, which I am not a happy camper about, and neither are a lot of people. Just making sure everything looks like it's working fine on YouTube, and the same thing on the live chat here. So that works. Okay, so let's take a look at some observations. And we start off with our radar here with our low pressure system exiting. We had some really good snowfall to the north of the forecast area, basically right around the Finger Lakes. We're talking about anywhere from like 5 to 10 inches of snow with a nice area of frontogenesis at around 850 millibars. And then this part right here, this is part of the polar jet stream coming in behind our low pressure system. Again, this feature is associated with the subtropical jet stream, and then you have the polar jet stream coming in right behind it. So it was a near phase, but it just missed. And so that's why it really wasn't a major storm. That and the fact that our air mass at the surface was as marginal as you can get. Really, these temperatures have not changed one bit since this morning. At 8 a.m. in the morning, we were in the mid to upper 30s along the coast, a few lower 40s down towards Wildwood and Cape May, and over the interior, lower to mid 30s, and pretty much that has not changed one bit since then. So this air mass is as marginal as you can get it, and then you combine that with a warm boundary layer, that tells you that the snowfall that's being shown on the model guidance, like the NAM and the HRR guidance, would be a little bit too overplayed, especially in your I-95 corridor where you have the urban heat island effect. This is, again, is a perfect example, and I went on a bit of a Twitter rant about this earlier on in the week with debate about some political commentators saying that, meteorologists aren't needed and you should just use your app. And then the Washington Post put out an article saying that, we agree there's certain points. I'm like, this is a perfect example right here, because the NAM was going 6 inches of snow in New York City. The European was going 4 inches of snow in New York City. How much snow did New York City get? A trace, if that. And the reason why is because of the boundary layer conditions, which models still have a very difficult time handling. So this is a perfect example of that type of scenario playing out. Now, granted, March is a nightmare for meteorologists to forecast snowfall because of these type of conditions. If your temperatures this morning were a degree colder throughout, let's say just 1 degree, okay, that fundamentally changes the entire forecast. It increases the potential for your boundary layer to cool, because then the vertical lifting that we saw with the frontogenesis would be able to produce more of a cooling influence. Therefore, you end up, instead of just a trace, you can end up with 4 inches of snow on the ground, like the European was forecasting. So it's a very, very difficult forecast to work with, and one which you kind of have to use a little bit of experience and then understanding wind direction and air mass transport as a result of that. It can be very, very difficult. Combine that with the ground temperatures, and there you go. The reason why the models create this error is because the way that the models forecast is this. Okay, so let's see here, 850 millibar temperature. So it takes the 850 millibar temperature. So it says, oh, look, we're below freezing, right? Then it takes what we call QPF. Now, QPF, let me see here, that's precipitation. So it takes the precipitation, which you see right here, say below freezing 850 millibars, 10 times whatever this amount is, which let's say it's about 0.4, and that's how you get your 4 inches. That's literally the snow map you're using. It's simple multiplication. There's no magic to it. There's nothing, some mysterious equation. That's it. 10 times whatever the QPF is. So that works fine in the dead of winter sometimes, but not very good in a scenario like this. So that storm is on the way out, and now we have another storm on the way that we're going to be keeping an eye on. On the water vapor satellite picture, this is a very progressive pattern. Active, but progressive. But of course, with these type of patterns, let me zoom out here, 500 millibar. These are 500 millibar winds. Make sure we have HD in here. We do. And okay, so here's the nature of this pattern, right? No blocking up here. It's a whole bunch of upper level lows. It's pretty much the exact opposite of what you would look for to slow down a storm. So what you would need, again, is a perfect phase. It's somewhat pretty good phase. In this scenario, what you're doing is trying to transport Arctic air, which is up here, and try to hold the moisture transport that's associated with this jet streak here to support your storm. So that's the pattern overall that we're dealing with. Within that pattern, we still have pretty robust La Nina that's been influenced by a Kelvin wave that is exiting, and that has led to our temperatures around the La Nina or El Nino Southern Oscillation Zone to support a weak to moderate La Nina still. So that's still in place going into the early spring. Let me pull up real fast. You see this right here? This is called the negative PDO. Why am I pointing this out? Well, you're probably going to be hearing a lot about the drought going on in the West. And that impacts us because that alters the 500 millibar pattern for us as well. Because typically when you get a major drought in the West, you end up with above normal precipitation in the East because there's always a counterbalance, right? So why are we seeing this drought? Well, historically, we've talked about this before, when you have a negative PDO phase, when you see this signature here showing up, and it keeps on showing up, that leads to stronger above normal heights over the four corners, okay? So you get the stronger drought. It feeds back on itself, and this type of drought pattern is not anything new. It literally wiped out an entire civilization of Native Americans back around the 1200s, okay? So this is not anything new, perhaps slightly enhanced, but nothing new. And this is an important signal for us as we go into the spring, because if we're seeing this high pressure ridge becoming more and more dominant as we head into the spring and summer months, that means we're going to end up with a more active pattern here. And active as in strong to severe thunderstorms. Just keep that in the back of your mind, okay? So we have that scenario setting up here. We have still a clear influence of La Nina on the 500 millibar pattern, the atmospheric pattern. Again, you can measure the influence of La Nina by the SOI index. Okay, this is the Southern Oscillation Index. This is, to me, more important than the sea surface temperatures because this right here provides me the understanding of just how much of an influence La Nina is having. So when you're in this range up here, that's a strong La Nina. When you're in this range here, it's a moderate. And when you're in this range here, it's a weak. And we're pretty much in the weak zone. On the other side, if you're looking for El Nino, then you want to be in the negative range. And what you typically look for a weak one, around 0 to -10. Moderate's here, strong is here. The last El Nino, last strong El Nino that we had these values down to about minus 30, 40. So that kind of gives you an idea of what these can range. Okay, so that again gives us an idea of the atmospheric pattern. So this would put into place the southeast ridge potential and a storm track more likely along over the coastal plain or over the interior rather than over the coastal waters. The MJO remains active as well. Talked about this with the long range thoughts the past couple of days. Very strong support on a variety of models of taking the MJO into phase 2 or 3 and then marching it through phase 4 and 5. And this is a cold phase for us. It's been chilly, but we're moving into a warmer phase. So we're definitely going to be moderating. So spring is on the way. I know it doesn't seem like it today, but trust me, it is on the way. Meanwhile, we continue to have our transport in the EP flux transport from the mid-latitudes into the stratosphere that is supporting another wave of strong stratospheric warming. And there is we had to wait all winter for this to take place. We finally get it in March. And guess what? The way that it evolved basically caused the polar vortex to split towards China. So as a result, we really didn't get the high latitude blocking that would really support this type of scenario. So that's the overall pattern that we're looking at. So let's talk about this storm. And I think I want to start off first, should I say, with the 500 millibar velocity here. And I want to show you what that phase looks like. So here's our model data. Here is our trough coming in. Now, here's a couple of things that we noticed right off the bat. While I drink my coffee, my Batman coffee. Always need it. Good stuff. All right, so what can we take from this trough here? Well, first of all, it's a positively tilted trough. Why is this important? A positively tilted trough means that your low pressure system is more likely to be very progressive, fast moving. Also means your precipitation shield is more likely to push fast to the east in this scenario. And so that is what we're dealing with here. We have a lot of lifting associated with this trough. A lot of very strong PVA here. Put this down before I spill it. But because you have a positively tilted trough, this argues against the idea that cold air is going to be able to invade the coastal plain and produce much in the way of any type of accumulation. So anyone that tries to, I've seen it already, unfortunately, trying to portray snowfall on the coastal plain, this right here should put a big warning sign on that, because this trough dynamic is this orientation suggests that by the time the cold air gets in, the lifting and thus the moisture transport is already racing off towards New England. So this is a big key right here. Also note that with our jet stream and our 500 millibar pattern is becoming pretty flat and pretty zonal out here. So this is kind of like the last hurrah type of storm here. And then after that, we get a lot of Pacific influence marching across, more of a zonal pattern marching across the country rather than a drop from Canada. So we go from a impressive storm to a progressive storm track. Very progressive, even more so than what it is now. So we take that, and I want to show you 700 millibar vertical velocity. Again, this is rapidly rising air, good support for frontogenesis. And kind of showing the same thing again. Look at all this lifting. But notice the trough, positively tilted. Everything's racing off to the east. And quickly at that. I would not be surprised based on what I'm seeing here that my range right now in precipitation that I have in place on the premium section on the map might be too late. It might be this storm might end faster than what's currently being forecasted based on what I'm seeing here. But I'm kind of keeping that range just to protect you. So that way you don't get blindsided by a longer precipitation event. And then here is our 850 millibar temperatures. Now let me zoom in on this because I really want to show you the impressiveness of our cold air transport. Okay, now ahead of this, here's our marginally cold atmosphere that produced our wintry mix today. We moderate on Friday and Saturday. I mean, look, this is very warm. This is temperature out ahead of this on Saturday morning, well above freezing. Now look at that cold air transport. That is some impressive frontogenesis at 850 millibars. So I have no doubt that you're going to see some very heavy snowfall over the Poconos and north central and northeastern Pennsylvania because of this gradient. That's impressive. And look what happens later on in the evening as this cold air comes in. You're talking about a 10-degree drop at 850 millibars. So there's no doubt that we have some very impressive cold air transport, and your high temperatures ahead of this cold front may be in the 50s, but by the evening you'll be falling into the 30s. Now I'm bringing this up because of what I'm seeing here on the 850 millibar winds here. And right here. Okay. In this scenario here, what typically happens is that you get a strong wind gust over the coastal waters, right? Beware of this signature for the immediate Jersey Shore, for Long Island and Connecticut. Not so much the interior. You'll get some breezy conditions from this environment here, but be very careful with this signature here with the potential for strong wind gusts right on the shore, especially the east end of Long Island, the way this is evolving and setting up. It's probably not being talked a lot about on news sources, but this scenario here, you get some mixing down. I'd be very, very careful along the Jersey Shore and around Long Island. For Saturday, I'd bring in any type of loose items, chairs, whatever, because they might be blown out or blown into your neighbor's backyard in this scenario. But it also leads to very strong warm air transport. So we have all these factors coming into play. And so the way I see this walking through is that if you're looking for a significant snowfall, you want to look here. I think that given the frontogenesis that we were just talking about, I would not be surprised if we have 1 to 3 inch snowfall rates in this area. I would not be surprised if we have 10 inches of cement-like wet snow in this area. But then just to the east, barely any snowfall at all. Why? Because in this environment here, you have temperatures in the 40s and 50s, and by the time the cold air works in and cools the boundary layer down, you already have dry air coming in right behind it. So I see this event as being very tight snow gradient, pretty much for the interior. And when I say interior, I mean the Poconos, the Catskills, maybe portions of northwestern New Jersey, but they're going to be right on the edge, the central Hudson River Valley, and then off towards the Green and White Mountains. If you're a skier, this is a perfect storm for you. But it's going to be cement-like snow, so maybe not perfect, but you get the idea. Rain on the coast and a lot of snow over the interior. Now, this scenario right here that's showing up, this is going to be widespread, very light snow and flurries, but not anything that would be anything significant. So maybe lingering snow showers on your car top, at in the late afternoon. And again, this is happening as the sun is starting to set, but with the March sun, slows things down a bit. So that leads to a warmer boundary layer overall in that environment. So again, I would not be surprised you get 10 inches here, 6 inches here, a trace here. Would not be surprised by that at all. Like literally a 10-inch gradient between Scranton and northwestern New Jersey. And so I think that's And let me guys, I know that this is more of a premium thing, but this is kind of like what I'm thinking this is going to set up here. Where you got that 6 to 12 inch gradient, and then you get this area. I kind of spread it out 1 to 6 inches until I get a little bit better data. Then I can kind of narrow this down a little bit more. But this area I'm very confident in, which is pretty much rain. This area I'm very confident in. And then this area I just got to work on more details to produce more of a fine tune for tomorrow morning. So that's what I got for now. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to touch on just to pattern overall, the polar vortex splitting. Let me show you this on the European. I'm using the European to show the polar vortex split because everyone can see it on the GFS for free. So not everyone can see it on the European guidance. And there's our split. What's interesting in this scenario is that while this is happening, you're also seeing pretty significant cooling. Let me show you that real fast. So there's your warming scenario right here. But you see everything else surrounding it, it's starting to rapidly cool. We're starting to see, with more increasing direct influence from the sun, the stratosphere overall rapidly cool. This is kind of like the last hurrah. After this, you're going to see rapid cooling take place throughout the entire stratosphere. And you're going to see the polar vortex consolidate and then collapse. And then basically dissipate as we head into the warm season. So this typically, when you see this type of environment take place, it typically leads to a contraction of the polar jet stream. And that's why we're seeing a lot in the long-range guidance, the monthly guidance, for the rest of March ending up pretty mild, which is pretty much what we've been talking about. So with that, I am going to take your questions and see what we have here in our live chat. And then let's see here. And of course, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Card. Let's see here. Ground temperatures are also rather warm than they were in January and February, especially after the 2 70-degree days. Yep. That's one of the factors why I, even though I got a little bit of heat for some reason about March not likely to be much of a snow producer for the coastal plain. I was all on board for the Poconos, Catskills, interior locations like that. But for the coastal plain, it's really hard to cool off the boundary layer, which is basically like the sidewalk, after you were 70, because that cement in that pavement retains that heat. So it's a lot harder unless you get a really, really impressive Arctic air mass to cool down that boundary layer. Coating of, James said, and good evening, James, coating of snow and grass and some slush on sidewalks and driveways in Morris counties, pretty much as expected. Upper level low to the southeast of Greenland is on the wrong side, not that southwest of Greenland. Okay. Which one? Let's see here. This La Nina seems to be more persistent than the first La Nina in this sequence. I could see what you're saying in that point. It definitely has a little bit more support via the Kelvin waves than we did with the last one, which is more just plain luck than anything else. But what I'm noticing with this La Nina is that it is weak, but it is hanging on longer. So you're absolutely right about that. But I'm not seeing a robust signal as far as the southeast ridge that we normally see with La Nina. Highly doubt the coastal plain gets any snow at all this weekend. Likely not. I would not be surprised seeing some flurries at the very end of this. This weekend is the type of event where Mount Pocono gets over 10 inches and Strasbourg gets minimal snow. I 100% agree. This is going to be elevation dependent as well as location dependent. And also the fact that you have very, very heavy wet snow, it's either an 8-to-1 or 10-to-1 ratio, snow ratio. So that's also going to hold down your totals a bit too. Any low top thunderstorm threat on the warm side this weekend, or will this be well to the south? I think that's going to be focused more towards southern New England. Should I say southern Mid-Atlantic? Let me pull up some data here. And go to the United States. Let's see if we can get some. I wanted to get the vertical. Here we are. Okay. So a lot of your convective environment, see, is down towards Virginia and then over the coastal waters. Let me see if I can shift more towards mid-Atlantic or not. Here we are. Perfect. Yeah, it's going to be focused more towards Virginia, North Carolina, than our neck of the woods. I hope the severe thunderstorms earlier this week are not a sign of things to come for the spring. I think they are, to be honest with you. I honestly see this being a very active severe weather season for the Mid-Atlantic, the Tennessee River Valley, Mississippi River Valley. During La Niñas, we get more of a robust polar jet stream in the spring, and that typically leads to stronger subtropical stronger low-level jet stream at 850 millibars. I would not be surprised if we see a lot of downburst wind events. I would not be surprised if we see a return of active tornado-like thunderstorms like we did last year. It's the same type of environment, same type of setup. One thing I'm going to be keeping a very careful eye on is the precipitable water values. The more that we end up above 1.5 inches, the more likely we're going to see thunderstorms capable of frequent vivid lightning, the potential for vertical wind shear, which will increase the potential for tornadoes, and also large hail. And then there's the downburst wind gust effect as well, especially if we get a little bit of these cold pockets associated with the polar jet stream dropping in. I definitely think that we have the potential for some severe thunderstorms. That could be pretty impressive. Let's see anything new on the YouTube side. Let's see here. Southwestern part of California, the rest of the state, not really. Let's see here. The models can change. We could see a big nor'easter. I want to address this with Dylan. Not that I want to pick on Dylan here. Here's the thing. The models do not control the weather. Okay? So, it's kind of an erroneous statement. The reason why it's an erroneous statement is because you have to have the correct environment in place to create a quote-unquote big nor'easter. Okay? You don't have the blocking, you don't have the pattern configuration, you don't have the ridge axis, you don't have the timing of the air masses correctly, and also you have nothing to keep the cold air locked in place. So, kind of no. The models aren't going to change because there's no environment to cause them to change. Okay? And the reason why the models wouldn't change is because the atmospheric pattern we are in. So there's that aspect. The models never control the weather. They don't control the weather. So if a model produces, let's say, a major snowstorm on the coastal plain, the next suite at 0Z, it's not changing the atmosphere. It's just wrong. And so therefore it should be discarded because it doesn't fit the pattern evolution overall of what we have in place. Over under for the month and day in which GFS spins up its first phantom monster hurricane. I would say June. I would not be surprised if early June we start seeing some idea of tropical storms and whatnot showing up, which most likely will catch some people's notice. The GFS, they said that they fixed this. And we'll find out this year because it was producing a lot of erroneous tropical systems. The European also was having issues with that as well. And I think it's because they put so much weight on precipitable water and the convective elements involved in that is creating a lot of convective feedback when it comes to warm core low pressure systems. I should also note that it was also causing some feedback issues with warm seclusion winter storms and how intense they can get. So I think it's a problem in which they were trying to correct an issue with the convection in the mild guidance and with these storms. I think they overcorrected. So we'll see whether or not they adjusted back so that way they can reduce these issues. Do you think tropical activity will be above normal this year? That's a two-part answer. If they continue to try to name subtropical systems that barely meet the criteria, then yes. Let's see, like last year they named a subtropical storm that literally existed for less than 6 hours. The longer they do stuff like that, the more likely that you're going to end up with above normal hurricane season. So I'm going to lean towards yes on the idea that we'll have an above normal season. But I don't think we're going to have a large number of major hurricanes based on what I'm seeing so far. And that could change depending on what's happening with the dust coming off of Africa and the state of the Atlantic. We're still, here, let me pull this up here. You see, as long as I'm seeing this signal right here, then you're going to have some inhibiting factors. And this is textbook of a negative AMO signal here showing up. So as long as I'm seeing this, then what you're going to have during the Cape Verde season is a slower development out here in the Atlantic and more weak storms as a result. You could still end up with rapid intensification with anything that comes around the Bahamas and the east coast of the United States and around the Gulf of Mexico, but that won't always be the case. Let's see here. Martin asks, thoughts on timing for heavier band of snow in central Hudson Valley on Saturday? Late afternoon? Yeah, pretty much. I'm looking at late afternoon. Let's see. Let's generally after 2 o'clock. Let me pull up. Where's that data? Here we are. So most of the morning you're going to be dealing with rainfall developing. And then, yeah, about, let's say from about 1 to 6 p.m., you're going to be dealing with some moderate to heavy snowfall. That heaviest band is basically setting up around 1 to 4. Let's see. Do you expect a more active Pacific season, particularly Eastern Pacific, which has been very quiet, historically speaking, the last 2 seasons? I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I want to kind of see where we are with the MJO. That's a bit of a wild card. And I also want to see just how strong La Nina is. The idea, there's a split between the mild guidance, between it weakening into a neutral state and remaining a La Nina state. So I'm not sure about that just yet. I'm thinking that we're going to be more neutral, so I think we should see more activity in the Eastern Pacific. But if we still have that really cold water in place like we do now, then we're going to remain below normal. Let's see here. I see widespread 60s starting next week through the end of the month. Could this turn into 70s?
For the Baltimore to Philadelphia area.
Well, definitely towards Baltimore. That's easy. Typically in these patterns, when you have a Pacific air mass coming in, and let's pull up the winds here. We'll do 300 millibar winds. Okay. So you see this type of pattern setting up here? This is transporting directly Pacific air right into the United States. So the reason why I'm pointing this out is that if we get a downsloping effect, which is basically air coming off the Appalachians, and it downslopes just right in terms of orientation, that typically leads to more above normal temperatures and the potential for your temperatures to push up into the 70s and even 80s in this environment, because Pacific air moderates rapidly. So that's certainly a possibility. but I don't have any hard data yet to support it at this time. Only to say that with the Pacific air mass marching across the country, if it downslopes off the Appalachians just right, you definitely can end up with days where temperatures spike above what's being forecasted. Let's see. So Card's asking, so more likely tropical systems spin up from old fronts and waves starting stuff up closer than long track Cape Verde storms. That's the way it kind of looks right now. Again, caveat here that things could definitely change. I don't see, based on the environment that's in right now, a lot of Cape Verde storms. But if we see the AMO weaken and become more of a neutral state, then that option comes back online. So we're going to have to wait and reevaluate by May. So very soon we start talking about sea breeze and sea breeze fronts. Yeah, definitely. And sea breeze thunderstorms as well. Let's see. Any more questions? All right. Let's see. Is there anything else going on in this environment? By the way, just a reminder, unfortunately, we moved the clocks forward, which means A, we lose an hour of sleep, and B, I lose an hour of model data. Now, I say an hour. It's still the same, right? But it's coming out later, so I'm not too happy about it. Personally, I just wish that they'd leave the clocks alone and leave it one way or another. But so definitely remember to push your clocks forward, and also check your batteries for your fire alarms. And so yeah, we definitely have to do that because it can be very important. The ones that we have, if we forget, it reminds us.
Usually about 4 a.m.
Yeah, 3, 4 a.m. Usually on a day. It waits until a day in which I decide I'm going to sleep late, and then it decides to wake us up at 4 a.m. So I think it has some sort of intelligence in that respect. Let's see. All right, we've had some pretty good questions tonight. So I'm thinking that with this storm, I want to pull up the precipitable water values, that there's some potential here for some pretty impressive rainfall. And the reason why is what I'm seeing here, right here. On Saturday morning, you're getting precipitable water values pushing over 1 inch here. Be very careful along the Jersey Shore, around New York City Metro here, for some torrential downpours on Saturday morning. Don't be surprised if we get some urban flooding out of this based on what I'm seeing with the precipitable water values. Notice also a very impressive gradient here that's associated with our Arctic air mass coming in, and associated with that, the drier air. Also, if you have fire extinguishers, which everyone should, we do, inspect them to make sure that they look to be in working order. Right, there should be a tag that gives you a date as well, as far as whether it is valid or not. Let's see here. Do you think there will be any ice for tomorrow commute in central New Jersey or just in general? Not widespread ice, but definitely some slick spots, especially in northwestern New Jersey, the Poconos, the Catskills, where you had more of that wet snow. That wet snow, anything that was wet is now frozen into a solid block of ice. So that's certainly going to be a concern. As you head down towards the I-95 corridor and point south, it's less of a threat, but there's still going to be some slick spots. But because of the nature of the cold air transport, you're also seeing a lot of dry air and evaporation. So the impacts are going to be a little bit less than what you would normally get than, let's say, up towards the northern interior, where we saw more snowfall today. I should also add for the Saturday event, with cold air, again, let me pull up this data here, just kind of illustrate Where are you? There you go. Perfect. Okay, so out ahead of this storm on Saturday, here's a nice warm up here. Temperatures in the 40s, mid to upper 30s in the morning. Now look at this Arctic air come in. By the evening, you're falling into the lower 30s along the coast after being close to 50. You're in the 20s here, teens back over the Poconos and Catskills. And that's by 5 o'clock. And by about midnight, you have temperatures in the teens and 20s. I'm bringing this up because anything that's going to be wet on the ground here on Saturday night into Sunday morning is going to be freezing into ice. So definitely be prepared for that and have some de-icer down and just make sure people are aware, especially if they're walking on your sidewalk, driveway, whatnot. There's going to be potential for some slick spots. Now, on the positive side, with all the dry air coming in as well, that helps evaporate and cut down that threat. But just be aware of that and be careful for that potential on Sunday morning. I know a lot of people go out to church or whatever. Definitely be aware of that and use some caution. And I'll take a few more questions, and I think we'll probably just call it a night based on what we have right here. Once this storm gets out of the way this weekend, starting next week, we're going to start to transition the live chat where I'm going to be taking more of the, I've seen some of the questions you guys sent in. Keep on sending in questions and suggestions on live chat on what to talk about in terms of any type of topics on meteorology. We're going to start covering more about severe weather, severe thunderstorms, and also some great books that you should definitely check out and read. And also we're going to start to cover more topics on young meteorologists and help in high school, college, how to prepare for a career. So I know a lot of you guys out there are, you love meteorology. Some of you are teenagers, and you have kids who are in school who are interested in meteorology. And I wanted to impart some of the things I learned, even though it was 20 years ago. It's still important today about classes you should take, courses you should really look into, and how to prepare for a career in meteorology. So we're definitely going to be covering that more as well, and of course everything else with that, and along probably me ranting about baseball at some point. And let me just make sure we got our questions covered here and here. Okay, good. And the last thing I just want to cover on is baseball, because I am a baseball fan. And I do not get how they cannot figure out this whole this strike situation, lockout, okay? Just play the game. For God's sakes, what's wrong with you people? Have we not gone through enough the past 2 years? That's all I'm going to say on that. Got a couple more questions here. Would love to hear into some depth about water body impact on weather. Oh, okay, like the Great Lakes, the Atlantic Ocean, stuff like that. Yeah, we could definitely cover that. Math is the key to the universe. Yes, it is. Although I will say this about math and meteorology. If you struggle in math, it does not mean you can't be a meteorologist. It just means that it's harder. But if you're tenacious enough, you could definitely pass it. I mean, once you get past multivariable calculus, then it becomes a lot easier, because then you kind of break the code, so to speak. I, for one, struggled initially with the math until I figured it out, and then I started to make it more fun. But there's nothing wrong with failing, okay? Just don't give up. Okay, that's the first thing you have to remember. In college, it's different than high school. In high school, if you fail, then the teacher gives you lessons. You try to make things up, and there's a lot of push to get you to pass your class. In college, it's up to you. You are the one that determines whether or not you pass or fail, because you have to take ownership of your own education. If you rely on someone else or some other process to do it for you, or just figure they'll pass you eventually, they'll take your money. They won't pass you, but they'll be more than happy to take your money to take your classes. Yeah, I would have to agree, Card. The same fork that put an end to I-95 winter weather probably also put an end to a lot of the baseball season, unfortunately. Steve, we are expecting you to do a rant on baseball at some point. Okay, well, all right. So here's the thing, right? The problem with the negotiations with baseball is that the Mets finally have an owner that is willing to spend money. And for some reason, all of baseball had no problem with the Dodgers spending money or the Yankees spending money, which is great. That's what you're supposed to do. Cohen comes in, starts spending money, and all of a sudden now they want to add another layer on the baseball tax, which is really just a cap, really. And they want to have all these limitations, right? Here's the thing. Cohen invested in the Mets, right? And then he made a profit of $79 million in a COVID year, which he then reinvested into the team. Kind of a crazy concept, something I learned in business myself. If you want your business to grow, you have to invest money into it. Okay? You can't just expect it to grow. So a lot of these small business, market teams, when they cry poverty, in reality, it's because they're not investing in their team. All right? If you have, especially today with the ability for social media and marketing, you should be able to grow your team just fine. And make sure you may not make the same amount of money as you do in New York, but you can still make a lot of great money in Kansas City. The Chiefs do it in football. Okay? NBA is able to do it, right? So I think that the problem is not necessarily owners versus players. The problem is versus small market teams that won't spend money correctly versus large market teams that do. And until that is rectified, we're not seeing baseball played anytime soon, which is ridiculous. Let's see. So, yeah, that's kind of my feeling on that in that respect. So we're going to call it a night for this one. I think unless you guys have any other questions about this weekend, I will take it. Looks like that's about it. So we're going to call it a night for tonight. I'll continue to update on this forecast tomorrow morning for our storm. Again, if you're looking for snowfall, head towards the Poconos and Catskills. Along the coastal plain this weekend, it's pretty much rain and then a very fast freeze on Saturday night that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Thank you again for being here for the live chat, and I appreciate it. And as always, stay safe out there.